experts in the area to discuss findings of the report on leveraging technology and innovation for disaster risk financing and management. And then that will not only be a panel discussion, but also a lively Q&A in which we would really like and hope to engage you in this discussion, to see your views and also inputs for fine-tuning this report. Okay, so this is basically the House rules and an overview. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Yasuyuki Sawada, Chief Economist and Director General of the Economic Research and Cooperation Department, ADB. He's the chief spokesman of ADB, and he leads production and dissemination of ADB's flagship knowledge products such as ADO and among others. But he also supports various policy forums such as ASEAN Plus 3 and also APEC. As you know, this report we're preparing is also deliverable under the APEC Finance Minister's process. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Yasuyuki Sawada.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of ADB, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's policy dialogue on leveraging technology and innovation for disaster risk management and financing. I would also like to express my gratitude to the participants of this event, and I'd like to thank our colleagues from the OECD for being here with us today. Disaster risk management and financing represents a key operational priority area for ADB. ADB adopted Strategy 2030, next 10-year strategy last year, and this ADB's Strategy 2030, the bank pledged 75% of its committed operations would be targeted towards climate change mitigation and adaptation by year 2030. And naturally, this includes disaster resilience and disaster risk management. Climate finance from ADB's own resources is moreover set to reach 80 billion cumulatively from year 2019 up until 2030. Disaster risk financing and mitigation has also long been underlined as a key priority among the region's policymakers, embedded in the APEC finance ministers' process priority areas over the last few years, and highlighted as a pillar in the SEB action plan in 2015. The OECD and ADB both actively support APEC initiatives in key areas and are active members of the working group on regional disaster risk financing and insurance solutions for APEC economies. The risk stemming from disasters triggered by natural hazards and climate change pose a significant threat to Asia and the Pacific region. With more than 4 in 5 people affected by natural hazards worldwide each year residing in this region, Asian Pacific region. The region, moreover, accounted for 55% of 60,000 disaster fatalities and 26% of the 128 billion in economic damages from 2000 to 2018. The region is particularly vulnerable to a wide range of natural hazards and extreme weather events, and rising sea levels threaten the long-term viability of many Pacific Island countries. Climate change, population growth, and rapid growth are moreover expected to compound the frequency and severity of disasters in the region, threatening to undermine continued socio-economic advancement and derail hard-won development gains. To that end, ADB and OECD are collaborating together on a joint report on leveraging technology and innovation for disaster risk management and financing. The initial findings were shared in the form of policy brief with APEC finance ministers during the APEC finance ministers meeting held in Santiago last month. And we presented as part of the APEC seminar session organized by OECD and ADB to allow policymakers to discuss the potential of technology in mitigating disaster risk. This report will examine how technological advancements and innovative approaches can facilitate preemptive action in disaster and climate risk mitigation, as well as effective response and swift recovery in the aftermath of disaster triggered by natural hazards. It will also highlight how technologies can expand the availability and affordability of financial protection tools such as insurance, thereby offering policy consideration for ADB and APEC member economies in order to enhance disaster risk management and financing through the application of technology and innovation. The report will furthermore discuss how governments can best strike a balance between fostering innovation and ensuring the proper safeguards are in place. We are pleased to see the findings of the first draft of this report presented here today, and in order to engage in a future policy dialogue with all participants in the next session, which will help further shape the report. With that, thank you once again, and I look forward to today's meaningful discussions. Thank you very much. So let's now turn to session one, today's event. We are happy to have Mr. Oliver Walker from Vivid Economics with us to present findings from the initial report just I mentioned, presented to APEC Finance Ministers meeting in San Diego last month. Mr. Oliver Walker manages a natural resource practice group of Vivid Economics and is involved in work across the finance, growth, and development and Earth observation practice areas. As you know now, disaster resilience operations really tap new big data, including satellite images and remote sensing data. His career as a professional economist spans consulting and academia, where he has held positions at the University of Cambridge and London School of Economics Grantham Research Institute. He's a leading expert on the economics of resilience, disaster risk management, and disaster risk finance. And he has published research on decision-making under deep uncertainty and insurance markets. Mr. Walker holds a PhD in economics from the University of Oxford. Mr. Walker, you have 30 minutes to speak on the initial findings of the report. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm very excited to be here today to present such a full room. As Yakisaki noted just now, this report at the moment is in a first draft form, so I'm looking forward to Lee's counterblast shortly after this presentation, but also to hearing your views on how we might take it forward, both in the Q&A session after these initial addresses and also the more in-depth panel session. So if we move on to the first slide, this is just by way of a little context and motivation. We were focusing on the APEC economies, as was indicated just now, a very large and diverse region, also one that's afflicted by very severe disaster risk. We noted average annual losses on this border of $140 billion and increasing disaster risk over time for a host of reasons, both economic growth and population growth, land use change, and of course climate change. What's more, the poorest in these societies are the most vulnerable to these risks, and the least developed economies in the regions face the greatest challenges in dealing with these. Of course, they're challenges for all of the countries in the regions, but those that have the least capacity in organising a coordinated response or organising the requisite expenditure and investment face particular challenges. So we've seen, and we will come on to in a moment, a host of technologies and innovations across the fields of disaster risk management and disaster risk finance. And our report, our report seeks to understand the potential for these technologies to address the key challenges in DRM and DRF across the APEC region, given the APEC region is so large and faces such a multitude of hazards. Much of what we say is actually going to be applicable globally. So we think about how these technologies can make a difference, and then what policymakers and finance ministers of the APEC group can do to make most of the innovation. So this slide here sort of presents in schematic form what it is that we're looking at. I think there are two important things to flag on this slide before we go into the technologies themselves. The first is that we're conceiving of technology and innovation rather broadly. So we're thinking both of new technologies that create new inputs for disaster risk management and disaster risk finance, but we're also thinking about new ways of doing things with what's already there, innovative processes that can also have applications in disaster risk management, disaster risk finance. So the first thing that's important is we're thinking about this very broadly. The second thing is when you think about it in these broad terms, what you see is innovation not just a set of independent innovations and technologies, but rather a host of innovations across an interconnected value chain. So we'll see on the input side of this diagram a number of technologies that have applications across the whole gamut of disaster risk management and disaster risk finance. And we also see a number of value chains, if you follow the arrows along, where we have multiple inputs, each with a multiplicative impact, feeding into applications which can themselves be innovative. So we have layers of innovation augmenting each other. And that's what we've really focused on today, these kind of innovations across value chains rather than individual innovations themselves. So the four areas I will spend most time talking about are, I'm sorry if I hadn't realised it was in such a big room, sorry if you struggled to read the text. In data collection, so data collection technologies can increase the information we have at our disposal to make assessments of risk and to promote risk awareness amongst the general population. They can also keep track of what's going on the ground. This helps enforce various preparedness policies such as land use management. They can also help us to organise response and delivery of assistance during the teeth of a disaster, if we know what's going on the ground. Finally, the information from these data collection technologies can, as we will see shortly, support the development of innovative instruments in the field of disaster risk finance. Second technology grouping is in data processing. So this can, I suppose, to a large extent, augment the innovations of the data collection group. So by helping to turn kind of raw, unprocessed data into accessible, actionable information on risks. And they can also, the data processing technologies can also, I suppose, fuse different sources of information, which can be useful, and to help us to understand what would happen to risks if things were differently. If we made this investment here, we made this zoning decision, how would risk change in the future? So they can help us to simulate what risks might be like if we take different decisions. The next group, the next step down the value chain is around data transmission. So this can help us target information on risk to people who need to know about it, so just communicating with people. It can also help support data collection techniques, so for things like social media can help be themselves a source of information by providing a platform in which we can, users can input information that's helpful to disaster risk management and disaster risk finance. The fourth area we'll focus on, which is more on the applied side, is on disaster risk finance. So these are, broadly speaking, instruments that transfer risk from those who are less able to bear it to those who are more able to bear it. And we'll go into all of these in a bit more detail in a moment. So, as I said to begin with on this slide, what I really want to emphasise is that innovation in this space is taking place along interconnected value chains. And it's important that we think about them in a holistic sense rather than as individual independent innovations. So in the current version of the report, we do look at things individually, but we've also started to look at things in more of a narrative form. And the next few slides, I'll go through some of the key narratives around, I guess you could think of a kind of keystone innovation area and some of the kind of augmenting innovations that take place along the value chain that give rise to certain applications. So the first innovation area I'll focus on is Earth observation, which is the use of things like satellites and drones to understand what's going on the surface of the Earth. Innovations in this area, there are some increases in the technological capability. We have things like certain new kinds of radar that can assist in classifying structures, and the sensors themselves have become more robust, so are much more likely to function during a disaster. The marketplace is also, the supply of Earth observation technology has increased quite a lot. There's a lot of capacity out there that means that we have much more easily accessible, high quality Earth observation data that has a high temporal resolution, it's very rapid, frequent flyovers, and now provides resolution, very high spatial granularity of information. So sub-meter resolution is now affordable and accessible. So there's on this left-hand side here, we have a number of inherent innovations in the field of Earth observation. Where the technology is really coming into its own is as a result of these multiplying factors along the value chain. And these affect not only the new innovations, but what we already have, which is quite a significant infrastructure of satellites particularly. So these new multiplying innovations belong to two categories. One is sort of new technologies, as in new things that we can do, and others we've called community-based innovations, which are more to do with ways of putting things together. So on the new sort of technological side of things, we've got AI algorithms, which I will come on to in a moment. We've got cloud computing that makes real-time processing of information from Earth observation technologies feasible. We've got software for consolidating this data that's much more standardized and accessible. And we have various platforms, spatial analysis platforms, the likes of OpenStreetMap, that Earth observation data can now feed into. That last one is actually within our community-based innovation group. We've also got a kind of an emerging ecosystem of entrepreneurial outfits within Earth observation that are helping to make these technologies more usable and find end users. So we've got some applications on the right-hand side. One I particularly like is the top one, which is to do with real-time flood hazard mapping in southern Africa. This I think highlights. So this is an initiative to provide an early warning system on floods for I think it's Mozambique and Namibia, maybe expanding to other countries already, as well as other hydrological information. This is of use to flood risk managers and water resource managers. I think it highlights a few important things that we might want to note later on. One is on the importance of the increased capacity of Earth observation. So there just wasn't risk information available in these countries before, certainly not at the temporal frequency required to support the early warning system that's now been developed. Secondly, this relies on very significant in-country engagement to make sure that the tools can be used by the people who need to use them, including crowdsourced validation. So we have users on the ground feeding in information on risk conditions that can be used by planners. And finally, it also highlights the roles for international organisations. So this was initially a G7 initiative, and it is expanded to various other stakeholders now. But technologies like this are subject to very significant economies of scale. They're highly scalable, and we need to think beyond national boundaries when implementing them at low cost and transferring best practices across different areas. So move on to the second narrative area, which is to do with artificial intelligence, which Earth observation was a data collection technology. Artificial intelligence is a kind of group of techniques that are about data processing. Here we have quite significant advancements across in various parts of the field. So Machine learning algorithms are becoming much more efficient at conducting rapid data analysis in order to generate forecasts for a diverse set of data sources. We also have sort of greater capability as a result of artificial intelligence techniques. So data mining support, data mining techniques are improving our ability to detect latent patterns within data sources. And we have natural language and image processing techniques that are increasing the scope of sources of data that can be used in artificial intelligence analysis. So all of these techniques help us to process the wide-ranging set of data that can be informative on disaster risk and help us to draw conclusions about where risk is and what we should do about it. They're multiplied by some familiar things I've already talked about. So, for example, Earth observation data and the Internet of Things provide more data for these algorithms to chew on. There's also cloud computing and graphics processing units that support very large-scale processing, which these are very memory-hungry processes that require this kind of technology. On the community side, we have platforms like GitHub, where code can be shared and improved by different users. We have social media as a data source for artificial intelligence. Our Japanese example goes into that. And we also have crowdsourcing of data. So the way these algorithms work is they need a training data set that establishes some relationships between different things we see. Some correlations between they train on those and they can be applied to other data sets. So crowdsourcing can provide that kind of data. The applications of all this, I think we've got a good one at the top there, which is a research project led by Stanford University, where a key indicator of vulnerability is poverty. And in Uganda, there wasn't very much information, or very spatially explicit information on poverty that allowed disaster risk managers and planners to prioritise intervention to protect those at greatest risk. So this used a deep learning algorithm that was trained on census data that was had partial coverage of the country to give a comprehensive map of poverty across the country, but could be overlaid with information on natural hazards. And the accuracy of this data on poverty, when tested, was found to be as accurate as traditional survey methods. The third sort of narrative I want to present to you is about the Internet of Things. So we have this in the first slide, was actually under the category of data collection. I think it actually straddles data collection and also data transmission, because the Internet of Things is a sort of a group of, I guess, a collection of objects that can detect atmospheric conditions or local conditions, but can also communicate with each other and help support coordinated response to any information that's received. So it really not only passively collects information, it also transmits it in an organised way. So the innovation in this space, I think, covers all aspects of this data collection and transmission process. So firstly, there are improvements in sensors, which are becoming more accurate and more reliable. There are also more new types of sensors that are becoming available, things like pressure sensors on smartphones, which we just haven't had before. And then the sort of transmission aspect of this is also improving. So the devices are communicating with each other without human assistance now, and the communications networks that can support that interaction are having higher bandwidth and more sophisticated. So, for example, 5G phone networks. So we have a host of innovation within this space. It's multiplied by a number of technological and community-based innovations that I think are familiar now. So new data sets that are complementary from Earth observation from social media, and also AI algorithms that can interpret diverse sources of information and tell us what they mean for risk, and communicate through smartphones. So a good example of this all being put into action that we looked at in the report is in El Salvador, where there's a project that developed, put together a network of sensors on mudslide risks. I think what was interesting about this from a technological perspective was that it had, the sensors themselves were solar powered, so that they weren't reliant on power networks which may be threatened by events. They also communicated with each other through a mesh radio network, which doesn't rely on mobile communication technology, which doesn't have 100% coverage of the area of interest. Is also a more robust form of communication, the mesh, which allows devices to communicate to each other via different nodes, if you like, within the system. This means it's a more resilient network of communication rather than relying on single parties. I think the other interesting thing about this example is it was all set up and designed and implemented by an El Salvadorian group. So they understood the problem. They realised that the Internet of Things network needed to be augmented by local expertise, so various community-based inputs where they had information that the sensors couldn't detect. This all needed to be combined, and the system itself needed to be adapted to local conditions. So that's the Internet of Things.